stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark Dolan and this is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes. Thank you for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Isabel Webster. Thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Very good evening to you. You're with GB News. Neil Oliver up next. First, though, a look at the headlines tonight. Hundreds of people have attended the funeral of Alice da Silva Aguirre, one of the 3 girls killed in an attack in Southport 2 weeks ago. 2 white horses wearing pink and white feathers carried her coffin in a carriage to the service in St Patrick's Church. During the service, a tribute to the 9-year-old from her parents was read out by her uncle. The 9-year-old died alongside B.B. King and Elsie Dot Stankham during a mass stabbing at a dance class. Meanwhile, the Justice Minister says the fallout from the recent riots is going to be felt for years. Shabana Mahmood says it will hold back the Labour government's efforts to fix the justice system, which was already facing a massive backlog of court cases and dwindling space in prisons. Well, it comes as today a 15-year-old boy has become the first child to be convicted for his part in violent disorder in Sunderland. The Education Secretary says that children will be taught how to spot extremist content and fake news online in the wake of the riots. Bridget Phillipson said that she's launching a review of the curriculum in both primary and secondary schools to arm children against what she's called putrid conspiracy theories. It comes as Sir Keir Starmer has suggested the government will review social media laws as more sentences for online offences linked to the riots are expected in the coming days. 2 people have died in the English Channel in what the government has described as a tragic incident involving a small boat. It happened in French waters and others rescued from the vessel have now been taken to France. The government spokesperson here says the tragedy underlines the terrible dangers of callous criminals exploiting vulnerable people. President Zelensky has, for the first time today, acknowledged that Ukraine is conducting a military offensive inside Russia's western Kursk region. The operation, which began 5 days ago, has taken Russia by surprise and prompted mass evacuations across both sides of the border. Ukraine says it's destroyed 53 Russian drones during an overnight strike. Here, people in northern parts of the UK are being warned to expect heavy downpours and possible flash flooding tomorrow. A yellow weather warning for thunderstorms covers Northern Ireland from midnight until 7 o'clock in the morning, while an alert for Scotland and north of England is in place from 2 a.m. Meanwhile, though, brighter skies expected further south, with warmer weather predicted for London and the southeast, where temperatures could reach 34 degrees Celsius. In Paris, there has been an unexpected security scare as a man was spotted climbing the Eiffel Tower earlier, just hours before tonight's Olympic closing ceremony. The shirtless climber scaled the iconic landmark, prompting police to evacuate the area. Some visitors were briefly trapped on the second floor, but were safely escorted out afterwards. And that incident unfolded as Paris was ramping up security, with 30,000 officers deployed on the streets tonight for the finale of the Games. And staying in Paris, Team GB have beaten their total from Tokyo 3 years ago by winning their 64th and 65th medals of the Games. It means Great Britain ended the 7th in the medal table with 14 gold medals. And the winners, Alex Yee and Bryony Page, will be Team GB's flag bearers at tonight's closing ceremony. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sam Francis, back with you for your next update at 7 o'clock.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Who do Keir Starmer's Labour Party work for? As the ruling party of Britain, they are, notionally at least, supposed to serve the British people. I ask the question, who does that Parliament work for, because only a person paying no attention whatever to all that's happening could accept the latest efforts are shaped with the well-being of the British people in mind. Prime Minister Keir Starmer has already said that, given a choice between being at Davos with the unelected, unaccountable billionaires or in Westminster listening to the elected representatives of the British people, he prefers Davos. I bet he does. Whoever he serves, it's not the rank and file out there trying to earn livings, hoping to see their children educated as critical thinkers, trusting that their hard-won efforts might be passed on to their descendants. Before anyone suggests Starmer's Labour is working instead with the well-being of Muslim people in mind, or indeed for any of the general population, I say that's for the birds. In October last year, when asked on LBC whether Israel had the right to cut off water and power, the right to besiege Gaza, Starmer said that yes, Israel had that right. Tens of thousands of women and children are dead in Gaza now. I say Starmer has been no friend, no sincere or consistent friend, whatever, of Islam either. To imagine Starmer sides with any everyday people is, I say, also for the birds. I say Labour's stance here in Britain is shaped with the intention of dismantling the edifice of Britain brick by brick, levelling it into the image of Airstrip 1, that province of the totalitarian superstate involving the renaming and repurposing of Britain as imagined by George Orwell in his novel 1984. I say Starmer and those around him, more specifically those he actually listens to, are using the groups so effectively divided one from another as the explosive mix with which to blow the place, so to speak, to bits. I say the Uniparty, Labour, Tory, pick your poison, has no love for Britain and despises the people rooted here. That population the Uniparty regards and seems determined to treat as impacted wisdom teeth they would rather see extracted. It also seems to me that Starmer and his ilk are so convinced of their rightness, of their moral and ideological superiority, that anyone with a different point of view is automatically ignorant, a thug, an oaf, a member of a lesser species. By word and deed, Starmer's Labour and the rest of the Uniparty regard tens of millions of born and bred British people with contempt, unbridled contempt, making him only the latest in a long line similarly minded. Decades of popular opposition to mass immigration, opposition dismissed and ignored by one government after another, has boiled over. There's no denying it. The unrest was predicted at least as long ago as the 1960s. What's not said often enough, however, alongside that truth, is that the unrest has proven, surely beyond reasonable doubt, to have been not collateral damage, some sort of unintended consequence born of well-meaning naivety, but the deliberate intention all along. People say to me that Britain's broken, and it surely is. Entire communities denied hope for homes, denied hopes of decent jobs, hopes of decent schools for their kids, denied hopes of better lives, condemned instead to an ever-decreasing spiral of lost freedom. Britain's traditional culture of hard work and hard workers has been replaced with a culture of dependency, of hopelessness. Britain is indeed broken, but what is most important to understand, I say, is that Britain was deliberately broken. Successive administrations looked on at a Britain that worked, literally and metaphorically, with domestic industries, domestic sources of energy, and set about its dismantling, Planned demolition with a view to replacing a capable, functioning place with a dysfunctional dystopia inhabited by a dependent, submissive population dumbed down into compliance with endless supplies of seductive convenience. Convenience that's illusory. I say self-applied manacles instead. Starmer is a lawyer to trade and must surely be familiar with the concept of malice aforethought, of mens rea, the guilty mind. Unhappy, desperate, appalling consequences resultant from the deliberate, and I do mean deliberate, flooding of incumbent populations with millions of incomers from elsewhere, from anywhere, incomers with radically different ideas about how to live, were predicted not just in the UK but all across Europe. I say the flooding was and is deliberate, and I fail to see how any honest person confronted with the evidence could say otherwise. Now the consequences are before our eyes, and what is the response of Starmer and his government? The knee-jerk response in the face of those he and they regard as lesser, as oafish and thuggish, because they do not appreciate the rate of change imposed upon their communities. It's to seek to bully and to frighten millions of people into keeping their mouths shut, their phones in their pockets. The reaction to the problem is to target those who would post videos online depicting behaviour the Starmer government insists must not be seen. Not only that it must not be seen, but that it does not exist in the first place. Quote, "The party told you to reject the evidence of your eyes and ears. It was their final, most essential command." Everyone quotes George Orwell all the time now, but if the cap fits, we might as well wear it. A visual policy now, repeated ad nauseum by the mainstream media, put into practice by the police, is to seek to frighten into silence those who have seen with their own eyes what is happening up and down the country and sought to share that information with fellow citizens. Over and over again, we are bleated at about our precious so-called democracy here in the home of the so-called Mother of Parliaments. We're told the word comes from Greek and means the rule of the demos, meaning the people. In recent months, I've been schooled in an alternative etymological understanding that suggests instead that democracy means rule by division, even divide and rule, which on present evidence makes a lot more sense. But what do I know? Sometimes I hear the decaying, corrupted circumstances in which we are made to live excused or explained as the consequences of willful blindness on the part of our leaders, but that's an excuse too far for me. The government and the establishment, ideologically captured as they are not at all blind. They have instead a clear-sighted, focused intention to remake Britain and the West in their own image. Some people condone the violence resultant from the boiling over of anger and frustration left simmering for 60 years. Some might even encourage that violence. I don't. But I do know the violence is happening. Neighbourhoods are destroying not just each other, but also themselves. And I do know its manifestation between communities up and down the country, all across Europe and the West, and all at the same time, despite popular opposition made obvious by the rising popularity of common-sense populist parties here, there and everywhere, that the boiling over of hitherto stifled and repressed emotion is the fault not of everyday people desiring no more than the continuation of everyday lives, but of politicians in service to ideologies bent towards Agenda 2030 and the rest of the anti-human dystopia. Because as sure as God made little green apples, the stoked and choreographed internecine strife we're seeing now, despite the best efforts of the government and the mainstream media to misrepresent it or to hide it altogether, will shortly be used to justify, well, goodness knows what, martial law maybe, or lockdowns for community safety, followed by the rollout of digital IDs and the rest of the ultimate control and surveillance cage. Once again, the mainstream media has a case to answer when the BBC and Sky and others seek to portray one set of protests as peaceful and others as thuggish and racist. This is blatant distortion, fiction driven by an ideological agenda. That same agenda sees the government determined to maintain the fiction, the distortion, on pain of punishment, prosecution and jail time for those judged to have incited hate. That incitement might only be words or pictures online, or on others' words or pictures shared. Elon Musk, love him or loathe him, appears to be under attack for maintaining his online platform X, Twitter, whatever you call it, as a means by which citizens are sharing videos and information that exposes the government and the mainstream media lies. The subject mass immigration, like others preoccupying the minds of millions, is thereby made a minefield into which too many fear to tread. The blunted, overused weapons of name-calling are used relentlessly by the ideologues of the government and aided and abetted by the mainstream media to make dissent a form of social, professional and reputational suicide. Racist, Islamophobe, anti-Semite and on until too many people simply shut up and put up with what they know is wrong. My friend, academic and philosopher Ralph Schulhammer said something this week that resonated powerfully with me. He talked about how populations have the right to demand their governments preserve the values of their ancestors. He said countries do not exist only in the present tense, in the here and now, but that they are in fact social contracts between the dead, the living, and those who are yet to be born. Here's the thing. People are angry, and justifiably so. The stoking of that anger has been the deliberate work of decades. Indignity and anxiety piled on indignity and anxiety. As much as anything else, people are angry because they've not been listened to, because they've been ignored. And so what does the government do in the face of people desperate to cry out in anger, desperate to be listened to? The government's immediate reaction is to shut those people up, to silence them. Glamis Castle, birthplace of the Queen Mother, is said to be haunted by a ghost they call the Tongueless Woman. The story goes that her tongue was cut out just before she was executed and that her wraith roams the grounds, pointing at her bloodied mouth. She wasn't punished for telling lies. On the contrary, she was silenced forever because she had come upon a terrible truth and threatened to repeat what she had learned. We've learned so many terrible truths these few years just past. We had started to call them out. Now we run the risk of playing into the hands of those who would have us silenced again. We need honest voices more now than ever. Next on the show, Colonel Douglas McGregor will be here to discuss a new law that would allow vetted and qualified migrants an expedited path to US citizenship by serving in the military. But before we get to all of that, Greg Swenson from Republicans Overseas UK is here with me. Greg, you listen to me possibly more often than is good for you. I can only apologise. But what might be an American's perspective on what is happening here in Britain right now?
Right. It's interesting to see. I was away for 3 weeks and came back. See what happens when I leave the country.
Yeah, don't do that.
But it's similar to what's happening in the U.S. So from an American's perspective, it's not outrageous because we look at what happened over the last 10 or 12 years. You had the first rebellion against the mainstream media and the government over controlling people's lives was the Tea Party back in 2009-10. And of course, the mainstream media and the government made fun of those people and, tried to describe them as extremists and hicks and hokey because they were just regular people, mostly in the middle of the country, not on the coasts. And so, it's that kind of pushback that is healthy, but it's a powerful force to fight against between the media and the government. It's powerful.
We often see traditionally here in the UK that something starts in the US and then we catch it. It crosses the Atlantic. But is there a sense this time that the way that our present government is going about the business of handling community strife, that I would say has been deliberately choreographed and driven, is ahead of even the American game, and that are Americans looking on at what's happening here and thinking, oh my God, that'll surely come here?
I hope they actually take a hard look at it. Charles Murray wrote a great book about 12 years ago called Coming Apart, and it talked about a lot of this strife in these communities, the Rust Belt communities that have been gutted, and yet we still wave in immigration, we still replace factories with cheap labor, factory workers. So, this has been going on for a long time in both countries. The question is, when does the pushback really start? I think the pushback started in the U.S. Surely started against the pushback against wokeism, and I think it's healthy. But you still have this George, this Orwellian discussion or description of what's going on. And if you oppose it, if you fight back, then you're a racist, you're an Islamophobe. And so it's really the boutique issues of the elite that have been forced down the throats of the people. And that's not healthy, and I think there will be, but it looks like, you know, the pushback here has started, and hopefully it works.
I think, though, that they're pushing those boutique issues as part of a smokescreen to cover what's actually happening. And although 5 years ago, if you'd said to me, do you think that the establishment and whatever government is in power is working systematically and deliberately to dismantle Britain, I would have laughed that off. I would have said, no, don't be ridiculous. But increasingly, I find that the evidence of my own eyes makes it inescapable. And, you know, Sun Tzu said, an evil ruler will burn his nation to the ground just to rule over its ashes.
Yeah, it's that old Marxist belief that you have to wreck it and then build it from scratch, from nothing, because they want to try this utopian society. They are trying to wreck America. They've succeeded in several states, California for sure, Minnesota for sure, Illinois, my home state. They're trying their best in New York. They're trying to wreck these communities and wreck these states. But people vote with their feet and they move to red states. So thrive in Florida, Tennessee, Texas, Idaho, thriving states, thriving communities, and people are just saying no. And so, you know, and I'm sure we'll talk about it today, about Tim Walz, the vice presidential nominee. You know, he's tried his best to wreck Minnesota, and he's perhaps succeeding, and you've seen $5 billion of taxable income leave the state. People are moving to North Dakota. They're not just moving for the weather in Florida. They're moving to North Dakota, which is arguably worse weather than Minnesota, and because there's freedom in that state, and you don't have that the government forcing their hand with the assistance of the mainstream media. So I think you're seeing the healthy revolt. It's a little easier in the U.S. because you have this federalist system and these 50 different experiments, and 25 of those experiments are working, and 25 surely aren't.
Oh. Next on the show, Colonel Douglas McGregor will be here to discuss a new law that would allow vetted and qualified migrants expedited path to UK citizenship if they serve in the military. You're watching The Neil Oliver Show on GB News.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
It was also announced that the Prince of Wales is set to star in a new two-part documentary on ITV covering his mission to try and eradicate homelessness.
Well, let's talk about this and much, much more with Angela Levin, royal biographer, who joins us in the studio. I'm glad to hear that this documentary's been made, Angela, because I worried that he made this big announcement about homelessness, and I thought, goodness me, here is somebody who could maybe do something about this. And then it's all seemed to have gone quiet.
He's been very busy with it, actually. He's gone all over the country to see different areas and how they have been, and to try and change people's attitude to homelessness, that they're people who need help and want to get back into a normal life, and he's there to do it. I mean, we mustn't forget that in, I think it was 2009, he slept out in the street to see for himself what it was like, and he also helped people who are selling the magazine.
Big Issue, no?
Yes, the Big Issue. And he's worked all day long with the same man twice now. So I think he was actually just covering the basic about what it was like for him and how he can now help other people. He and Catherine are putting £3 million straight away into that, and it's going to
Where
be...
Where does that money come from?
Their own foundation, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so they're not taking it from our tax or anybody else's, you know, and there will be a lot more, and he's been getting the money to do this, and I think he wants to do this so badly because of his mother. You know, she took them to see people who were homeless.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is the nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back to the Neil Oliver Show. A proposed new law would allow vetted and qualified migrants a speedy path to US citizenship if they serve in the military. America started the year with its smallest military in more than 8 decades at just over, I think it's 1.2 million, the lowest total since before they entered the Second World War. So will this new bill strengthen the US military in any meaningful way? I'm joined now by retired US Army Colonel Douglas McGregor to discuss this. Good evening, Colonel. Always good to see you.
Good to see you, Neil.
I believe it's being bandied about as the Courage to Serve Act. What will it mean? Can you educate my viewers about what it will mean for the United States of America and her citizens?
I think it will mean certainly a reduction in our readiness to fight. I think it will affect our overall efficiency and effectiveness very negatively. And we need to understand that we've been through some of this before. During the American Civil War, we imported huge numbers of Europeans to come to the United States and serve in the Army against the South because we'd taken heavy casualties. We were having trouble replenishing the ranks. And the promise was you serve in this for 3 years or to the point where the war ends, and then we'll award you citizenship. We found that those formations, when they were subjected to heavy fire, were the first to break and fall back. And ultimately, we had hundreds of thousands of desertions. The rates of desertion were very, very low among the native-born Americans, but very high among the foreigners. And I would expect something similar. Our concern as American citizens right now is that this is part of the denationalization effort that is ongoing in Washington, to turn the Army and Marines as a minimum, probably as much of the force as they can, into a foreign legion, manned by people who are, for the most part, non-Europeans, which is part of this larger denationalization, flood the country with people that have nothing in common with us, are not here to assimilate, did not come here for a specific reason to become Americans, are simply here looking for a ticket to the consumption machine.
What is envisaged for these incoming people? Will they be fighting enemies, foreign or domestic? What will they be for?
Well, that's you've just hit on the key aspect of this whole thing. We've made it very clear in recent years, because of the enormous problems we've had and all the failed interventions, many of our best soldiers, officers have left. And so we've said, no, we're not going to commit ourselves to any more massive interventions on the ground. We're going to rely primarily on air and naval power. So many people watching this have concluded that it certainly is the case in the Army and the Marines, where these people will be foreigners in uniform and could conceivably be used against us, the native-born population. So naturally, we oppose it.
Bear with me, Colonel. Greg Swenson from Republicans Overseas with me in the studio. What do you make of it? Are you an American citizen? You look on at that. How does that make you feel, the thought of a foreign legion deployed within your country and possibly sent overseas on your behalf?
It's the ultimate outsourcing, right? We've done this with factories, we've done this with industry, and now they want to do it in the military. So I agree with the Colonel. I mean, it's outrageous. And we shouldn't be surprised, by the way. Look what they've done in the last five or so years with the woke emphasis in the military, with the DEI. The military's become an HR department, basically. They threw, I think it was 8,000 or more soldiers, sailors, and Marines out of the service because they refused to be vaccinated and didn't reinstate them. So you have all this kind of insane wokery that's depressing the people, the young people that would normally want to enroll and enlist.
Colonel, Greg invokes the spirit of insane wokery there. Not to put too fine a point on it, who does think this is a good idea in Washington? Where is this coming from?
Well, I think the hardcore left, that is for the denationalization of the country, that would like to pursue vigorously the replacement of the native-born Americans. people who are fundamentally anti-Christian and believe that white supremacy or white Christian nationalism are the greatest threats to the country. The trouble with all of this is that, you can get all the, what I would call white supremacists together in a phone booth and let the three of them fight over the phone. That's a non-issue, but it's part of the diatribe that we hear from the left. It's part of the transformation process. You can link this to globalism, the WEF, your own ruling class is equally inclined in these directions. Anything that is Native American, Christian, and effectively part of Western civilization is being treated as the enemy. So this is one way to get at it. And I think the great danger is they think that these troops can be used against us.
I've spoken to various people over the months. Brett Weinstein comes to mind, yourself, others, Michael Yon, talking about invasion, using that word, using that vocabulary about what's happening on the southern border. Now, how even more alarming for, for American citizens that the invasion force is actually armed and uniformed.
That's exactly right. And here's something else to consider. I talked about efficiency and effectiveness. Most of the people coming into this country are not coming in with the skills that we would look for in modern military organizations. These are not well-educated people. They're not going to march seamlessly into the economy and hold down jobs as engineers, accountants, and so forth. The problem is you're not getting the quality manpower that you need today in the armed forces. The days of bringing in people that had almost no education and frankly were ignorant and could have a rifle shoved in their hands and sent to the front are over. We need quality people that can man lots of complex equipment and technology. That's not going to happen. So the only purpose here is to further the denationalization of the United States.
The denationalisation of the United States of America, what a prospect. Colonel Douglas Macgregor, I've only run out of time where I would keep this conversation going because I find it so fascinating and frightening. But thank you so much for your contribution so far.
Thank you, Neil.
Coming up next, I'll be asking Natalie Morris, co-host of the Redacted podcast, of which I am a regular viewer, what she thinks of the Kamala Harris fever, which I think has definitely taken hold in the USA. Don't go anywhere.
Hello, welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. As we go through Monday, it's going to be turning increasingly hot and humid for some of us, with the risk of thunderstorms in the northwest, but it will be turning fresher later. Looking at the bigger picture, we've got an area of higher pressure across the UK. Further towards the west, a deep area of low pressure, and that's helping drive southeasterly winds. So through the rest of this evening, many places staying largely dry, but as we go through the night, we'll see the risk of thunderstorms developing firstly in the west, but then across Northern Ireland and parts of Scotland later, and we have got some weather warnings in force, so expect frequent lightning, torrential downpours and some gusty winds. And temperatures overnight, well, it's going to be feeling quite uncomfortable, some places not dipping below 20 degrees. Now, as we start Monday morning, we have this band of heavy, thundery, showery rain across western parts of Scotland, moving its way north and eastward, so there could be some difficult driving conditions in this, with frequent lightning as well and some torrential downpours. Northern Ireland turning drier as the day progresses, and across much of England, largely dry but cloudy further toward the west, and already feeling quite warm by 8 a.m. So as the day progresses, that band of rain will continue to push its way north and east, with some thunderstorms even ahead of that as well. So they can't be ruled out completely across the south, but many places should largely miss these. Many places seeing some hot sunshine, especially across the southeast. It's going to be feeling very hot and humid, with highs of up to 34 degrees, but fresher further towards the west. As we go through Tuesday, still a warm start in the south and east, but bright elsewhere. Then we have another band of rain moving in from the west, so turning increasingly cloudy with outbreaks of rain for many across western areas, sunshine and showers behind that, and that sets the scene through Wednesday and Thursday, with unsettled weather on the way, but turning fresher as well. Bye-bye.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Pearce. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Bev Turner. Thank you for joining us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Emily Carver. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Neil Oliver Show. It's been another busy week in American politics. I can't get enough of it at the moment, and the momentum currently building behind Democrat candidate Kamala Harris shows no sign of abating. Latest polling figures suggest Kamala Harris is now leading Republican candidate Donald Trump, who had been comfortably ahead when Joe Biden was still intending to run. Is Kamala Harris, the current Vice President, enjoying a honeymoon period with the voters, or is this something more significant? I'm joined now by the co-host of the most excellent Redacted podcast, Natalie Morris. Thank you for joining us, Natalie.
It's absolutely my pleasure.
Shouldn't we have questions to ask about why Americans seem to be being offered the most unappealing cast of characters?
Yes, I think it's fair to call her unappealing, but I think it worked to her advantage to be in the shadows for 4 years, because now she's not being blamed for the failures of the Biden administration. So people are kind of like, oh, she's there. She's a woman, she's a person of color, she's somebody who speaks in a kind of like, hey, we represent minorities type of way. And so I can say that I understand this because I voted for Barack Obama under those same kind of faux inspirational slogans. And I missed it for 8 years that he was waging war in the Middle East, that he was literally committing war crimes, and that Hillary Clinton was kind of holding his hand, waging war in Syria, waging war in Yemen, waging war in Somalia. And so it's easy to sort of not understand those things because Americans maybe are not studying and get excited about this archetype. That's what I see as is happening. And so when I see on social media and other places people who are excited about Kamala Harris, I'm like, why are we not assigning her blame for what the Democratic Party has done since the Obama administration? I'm very confused by it, as much as I'm just sort of watching.
Precisely, but you put yourself, you cast yourself in that role of having been beguiled by the machinery that got behind Obama. But in a way that Kamala Harris hasn't been. He was much more of an unknown quantity. Americans have had years worth of footage of Kamala Harris being Kamala Harris, and her polling was through the floor. It was lower than anybody almost had ever been, and yet suddenly from the bottom of the well that polling is in the ascendant. Where is the memory and the awareness of the American viewer?
It's confusing, but like I said, she flew under the radar for so long because Joe Biden was so fun to watch, and because we had a war, we have a recession. She doesn't say anything of substance, so we can sort of pretend that that lack of substance is just her waiting in the wings to pounce. I suppose that's really the only reason that I can say. And also that Donald Trump is kind of a bumbling character. He's a known character. You know, some of the things I've seen online of people who want to be inspired by Kamala Harris is that she may be well educated. I don't know. Can we call her erudite? She's well, I don't know. Well educated is not well spoken. We're seeing that play out increasingly, as when she's asked what is she going to do about inflation, she just explains that it's a problem. So I don't know. Again, I think that it speaks to the fact that if you have a shiny, nice archetype and you can distract with the culture wars, because her main promise for freedom is freedom to have an abortion. There's no other freedom that she stands for. We did a segment just this week about all the things that she's promising in terms of freedom. It's not freedom to criticize a war. Heck no. It's not a freedom to criticize the government. It's not a freedom to question the pandemic. No, all of those freedoms were taken away during the Biden administration. But she's allowed to, again, I just think she's a well-shellacked character when you juxtapose her with Joe Biden, which is just sad at this point.
Greg Swenson, Natalie is alluding there to this slogan, this word, freedom, that has become the point of the Kamala Harris, Tim Walz run for the White House. What do you make of Natalie's questioning of exactly what they might mean by freedom, given their context? It's just that they just use political slogans, right? She's not done interviews. Kamala has not done interviews, nor has she done press conferences. So it's very well crafted. So the campaign and the party are just crafting this image of the new and looking to the future and freedom. That people overuse the word freedom, but Natalie has a great point. Freedom, there are no freedoms she's advocating. And I think the collusion between the Biden White House, which she was part of, or in spite of trying to distance herself, colluded with social media companies to basically keep their narrative. Definitely with any kind of skepticism toward vaccines, any kind of skepticism toward mask mandates. But taxpayer-funded abortions up until birth, and even no protections for a child of a botched abortion, that's savage. And it polls at 13, and it polls at 18 with Democrats. And yet, that's what she's leading with. Natalie, when I heard, I saw your piece about freedom, and I was immediately inspired or reminded of the Chris Christopherson or Janis Joplin line about freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose. And I wonder if, in fact, consciously or unconsciously, what Kamala and Walz and the Democratic Party, by extension, might be actually subliminally saying to people, what they're offering is freedom from freedom. Stick with us, and you won't have the onerous burden of freedom and, open brackets, responsibility.
Well, look at what the Biden administration is litigating right now. They are litigating for their freedom to continue to take your freedoms. So when it comes to the excellent point about social media censorship or freedom to continue to redefine gender. That's what they want. Freedom to keep open borders. Now we see several states litigating for the right to close their borders, and the Biden administration is litigating against it. They want to say, nope, open borders, you cannot protect yourself. So this freedom is freedom for them. It's freedom for the limitless kingmaker type power that they are hungry for, because the Democrats are the company guy for big government. And that's not to say that Republicans they have no spine. They're not standing for anything. They're not showing us what they actually could do in terms of shrinking government or bringing us freedoms. But at the same time, the Democrats are doing this hoodwink in terms of freedom, because it's really freedom for government, not for people.
Oh, you've raised even more subjects about which I could talk to you for the next hour at least, but Natalie Morris, time is against me. I cannot recommend strongly enough that people tune in to watch Redacted, yourself and Clayton doing the job as independent journalists that the mainstream media is so often refusing or anyway failing to do. Natalie Morris, it's been lovely to hear your perspectives.
Likewise. I really enjoy your show as well. And we study really hard to deserve our audience. And I can tell that you do too. So we're bookish nerds who are trying to get the truth.
Indeed we are. We will talk again. Natalie Morris, thanks so much. Coming up next, we'll be asking a finance expert what caused stock markets around the world to plummet this week, losing billions in value, we're told. Don't go anywhere.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Apparently, almost 70% of 18 to 25-year-olds, we don't know whether that's men or women, but they say that women shouldn't breastfeed in public. 19% would even go as far as labelling it disgusting.
Well, only a quarter of Brits say that women shouldn't have to cover up when they're breastfeeding. So clearly there is a big debate here and one to get to the bottom of. And to do so, we're joined by parenting journalist Annette Kellu. Really good to see you this morning, Annette.
Really good to see you.
Why is this stigma still existing in our society?
I think we've got a case here going on of double standards. I don't know about you, but I live near a park, OK? One little hint of sun, the men get completely naked. Honestly, you've never seen anything like it. The bodies are out, all different shapes and sizes. So why is it not OK for a woman to feed her baby? You know, we've got this whole thing. They're OK to be naked doing what they want. Why can't a woman just feed her baby? Why is it shameful in 2024? And it's interesting what you say about the 18 to 25-year-olds, because I really want to know, are they men or women? Because I feel like they'd be men.
I was going to say, have you got a hunch? Have you got a suspicion?
Yes, I have. And I think as well, they're thinking of them as sexy time, you know? And I feel like they're not... Well, maybe that's because they're bombarded with images and they see things like that they're seeing it in that context. But it's really not. It's feeding the baby. It's simple. Shouldn't be shameful.
But do you think for men it's like they can't see the difference? There's so much porn in society, isn't there, that breasts are sexualised and seen as this sexual object and not actually for their main primary purpose, which is actually feeding a child.
Immediate association.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
they can't.
And you can't see that they could have two functions.
Absolutely. And to them as well, I feel like they see it, and on the other side of it, they think like, ooh, mummy, and that brings up weird feelings for them, maybe.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday, we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Neil Oliver Show. Financial turmoil hit stock markets around the globe this week. The US stock market saw its biggest daily drop in almost 2 years, while 40 billion was wiped off the FTSE 100 on Monday. Were these somewhat random fluctuations or worrying signifiers that a recession may be around the corner? To discuss it, I'm joined by Andy Sheckman, president and owner of Miles Franklin Precious Metals. Great to see you again, Andy.
Neil, thanks for having me, sir. It's a pleasure to be here. Appreciate it.
Great stuff. Now, the stock market this week, was that blips or was it the beginning of the end? I keep hearing threats of the hurricane looming. My guest here in the studio, Greg Swenson, is talking about cracks there in the US economy. What significance should we take from what happened this week?
I mean, it's the largest single one-day point drop in the index's history. It's a big deal. The biggest drop in the history of the Nikkei. Biggest drop we've seen in I don't know how many years. Taiwan, 57 years. South Korea since the great financial crisis. It's not something to be underestimated. And Neil, what I really think the big issue is that similar to the United States, similar to what was witnessing the United Kingdom when they tried to raise rates, saw what happened to the pension system. Well, Japan tries to raise rates a little bit, strengthen their currency, and all hell breaks loose. The Nikkei starts to collapse and it starts to reverberate around the world. This Japan carry trade is a big deal, but what it signifies to me is just how much we are trapped between austerity and inflation. Can we normalize the balance sheet or do we have to give in to inflation? And what does that lead to? So it really signals to me that due to the suppression of interest rates for a very long time, all of these governments have painted themselves into a corner, and you can see what happens when you try to normalize. Just trying to normalize a little bit creates a catastrophic chain reaction all the way around the globe. It's not a good sign, really, isn't it, Neil?
For the longest time, it has felt like a can that was able to be kicked ever further down the road. But that was underwritten by the US hegemony and the US dominance of everything financial, the petrodollar, the reserve currency and all of the rest of it. But as I understand it, as a financial novice, that time is either over or coming to an end, and we have the rise of phenomena, if I can use that word, like the M Bridge, like the gold-backed unit, which is a token of currency for the BRICS nations. There are so many alternatives now to US hegemony that what had been a can to kick down the road now feels as if it might finally be being confronted in real time.
Yeah, I mean, the can was able to be kicked down the road, Neil, because of confidence in the United States, confidence in the world reserve currency. We are a country right now that is creating, get this, $100,000 worth of debt, 1, 2 per second, 5, 6, 7, and go on as long as you can keep snapping 100,000 in debt every second, 24/7. That's $1 trillion worth of debt every 100 days. It took 200 years to do it the first time. So we are destroying the value of the currency. And when you talk about confidence, that is what backs this currency right now. It used to be backed by gold, right? And then you could argue loosely the petrodollar, which Saudi Arabia just a few weeks ago said, listen, we're not going to re-sign the exclusivity deal. We'll still take dollars, but we're opening it up. And that immediately killed the hegemony. Didn't kill the supremacy yet, but when you look at the way things are being conducted in the United States, both from a standpoint of massively irresponsible fiscal policy, spending like we're addicted to, like a drug addict who can't get off the drug, and we continue to spend and borrow. And we look at the United States and the United Kingdom as an example, one broke nation borrowing from another broke nation. The UK is buying all the debt from the US right now. I mean, it's almost laughable. And when you talk about what this truly means, yeah, we have lost confidence, not only in the way we manage our currency, but we've weaponized the dollar against a country like Russia. This has nothing to do with my feelings on Russia, but when you take $5 billion of Russian assets and use the proceeds to give to the Ukraine, a country they're in the midst of a war with, in the form of weapons, that's a line you don't come back from. And you're seeing the same thing with the European Union, taking the interest on $280 billion of Russian assets and using it to fund a loan to the Ukraine. These are our problems which are chipping away at the trust. And when you talk about mismanagement of the currency, weaponization of the treasury market, and then just what's happening in our country, lawlessness, open borders, questions around the election and the judicial system, it's all chipping away at the full faith and confidence of a system that is no longer backed by anything, and is leading to the rise of, like you said, Project M Bridge and the unit currency. And I'm impressed that you said that, because not enough people know about it, but it might be the very biggest thing that the West has faced in a very, very, very long time. And God bless you for having the knowledge to talk about it, because really, to me, it's being way underestimated at its significance.
Bear with me, Andy. With me in the studio, Greg Swenson. These really do feel like tumultuous times that we're living in. You know, I grew up in a world in which the US was just the good guy, was just the trusted presence, the white-hatted cowboy. And I long to live in a world in which that might be true, but it doesn't feel true at the moment. And in fact, America's actually managed to cast itself as the hypocrite on the world stage by this weaponization of the dollar that Andy's talking about. You know, this taking Russian assets. Europe's it's taking and spending the interest on Russian money in European banks. And now the rest of the world, which is where most people live, looks on at the US and says, we can't trust these guys.
Right, and because you never know who's going to be next. And you know, you have to pick your, you can't pick your enemies, but you have to pick your friends, wisely. And the US hasn't done that. And at least in the last 3 years. And so, you know, the Biden administration, and this is where the lack of trust that Andy mentioned comes in. The Biden administration, you know, shut down reopened the Keystone pipeline or the XL pipeline, and then when Russia didn't behave the way they wanted them to behave, they shut it down again. They cozied up to, you know, they shut down the energy industry in the U.S., and that affects our allies, right? That affected, natural gas prices went up 5-fold in the U.K. and Europe, thanks to Biden, you know, stepping on the neck of the U.S. energy industry. It affects world prices, it affects our allies, and so that caused much pain. You know, fertilizer companies were going out of business here in the UK. So, you know, with friends like that, who needs enemies? And so, yes, that lack of trust is increasing. And I think, then, of course, a year later, Jake Sullivan went to Moscow to beg Putin to pump more oil.
Going to have to jump in there, Greg. Coming up next, Iranian academic and political analyst Mohammad Saeed Marandi will be here to discuss fears that the Middle East crisis may escalate. I will see you shortly.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. As we go through Monday, it's going to be turning increasingly hot and humid for some of us, with the risk of thunderstorms in the northwest, but it will be turning fresher later. Looking at the bigger picture, we've got an area of higher pressure across the UK. Further towards the west, a deep area of low pressure, and that's helping drive southeasterly winds. So through the rest of this evening, many places staying largely dry, but as we go through the night, we'll see the risk of thunderstorms developing firstly in the west, but then across Northern Ireland and parts of Scotland later, and we have got some weather warnings in force, so expect frequent lightning, torrential downpours and some gusty winds. And temperatures overnight, well, it's going to be feeling quite uncomfortable, some places not dipping below 20 degrees. Now, as we start Monday morning, we have this band of heavy, thundery, showery rain across western parts of Scotland, moving its way north and eastward, so there could be some difficult driving conditions in this, with frequent lightning as well and some torrential downpours. Northern Ireland turning drier as the day progresses, and across much of England, largely dry but cloudy further toward the west, and already feeling quite warm by 8 a.m. So as the day progresses, that band of rain will continue to push its way north and east, with some thunderstorms even ahead of that as well. So they can't be ruled out completely across the south, but many places should largely miss these. Many places seeing some hot sunshine, especially across the southeast. It's going to be feeling very hot and humid, with highs of up to 34 degrees, but fresher further towards the west. As we go through Tuesday, still a warm start in the south and east, but bright elsewhere. Then we have another band of rain moving in from the west, so turning increasingly cloudy, with outbreaks of rain for many across western areas, sunshine and showers behind that, and that sets the scene through Wednesday and Thursday, with unsettled weather on the way, but turning fresher as well. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You really could become the next giveaway winner, with your chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash to spend on anything you like. Listen to what some of our previous winners have to say about winning big with us.
Hi, my name's Victoria. I won the Spring Great British giveaway. So the day we got the money in our bank account, everything just felt just a lot nicer. We went out for dinner. Just enter. And you never expect to win, but I did.
Get your entry in now. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07, PO Box 8690, Derby, DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
They catch me, Martin Daubney.